So we are starting this. I have no idea if anyone is going to come, but I am trying to. Never done an Instagram live, so usual apology for anyone, any incompetence on the technical side. Let's see. I'm just trying to invite my buddy Pedro here. I'll tell him right now. He'll give him. Oh my gosh, 9 people are watching. Okay, you've been invited. Hey, how's it going,
Yes,
buddy?
can you hear me? Can you hear
I
me?
can hear you. I finally got a
Finally.
hold of you.
Yes.
Let's see if I can get my hair in view. All right, we good to go?
Good to go.
Ready to go. Um, all right, so the biggest challenge right now is going to be limiting this to an hour. I have a real job where I talk about philosophy and energy, and I committed to something in an hour. So there's a lot to talk about, but maybe I'll start off by I'm just going to read the post that I wrote, which I have no idea what you think. So we haven't discussed this in advance, and I guess let me just say in advance, this is my good friend Pedro Araujo. He is like me, he's a black belt. Unlike me, he is a really good black belt with a really good competition career. He teaches Gracie Baja in Houston. We're both part of Gracie Baja, and he's awesome at jiu-jitsu, good friend. So we 2 years ago we did some ADCC picks. We did a show called Philosophical Jiu-Jitsu. It was really fun. And one of the ideas I had was, as a philosopher, it's interesting to think about how philosophy, so thinking about your basic ideas, like your thinking methods and your assumptions and your values and your terminology, is useful for thinking about anything, including thinking about predicting jujitsu. So I sort of gave how I approach thinking about jujitsu predictions. Pedro gave his, and it was pretty interesting, and some people liked it. Now this year it's interesting because it's actually much more philosophical, because there's been this controversy because in addition to ADCC, which is Abu Dhabi Combat Club, the World Championships of Grappling, there has been something called CJI, called Craig Jones Invitational. Craig Jones, a successful but never winning competitor in ADCC, started an event that directly conflicts with ADCC, and basically paid a lot of money to get people not to compete in ADCC for various reasons. So I'll just read what I wrote. We'll sort of dive deep into it, but I want Pedro's initial take. So what I wrote is the fundamental confusion people have about Craig Jones Invitational is that they and he are equating a vanity vehicle with an innovative business model. In the last several years, Jiu-Jitsu has progressed a lot thanks to innovative business models by John Danaher, Gordon Ryan, FloGrappling, and Mo Jassim, who made ADCC profitable. It used to be kind of a charitable vehicle, but he made it profitable and way more prominent. And I said, note that these are the targets of Craig's ire. So these are the people he goes after, even though he supposedly cares about the sport and the growth, even though their work has dramatically grown the sport, including overall fighter pay. But while Craig attacks those who have actually done the hard work of creating innovative business models, he is doing a media tour celebrating his virtue and getting a random rich person to burn $3 million in a wildly unprofitable way to pay athletes far more than market value and charge the world nothing to see it. This vanity virtue signaling would be cringeworthy enough on its own, but it's made far worse because it has, by paying off athletes to abandon ADCC, dramatically compromised 3 of the grappling world championships divisions plus the open weight division. And then here's my analogy. If a billionaire paid 4 of the world's top 8 sprinters a huge amount of money to skip the Olympics, would you celebrate that as a victory for sprinter pay? I doubt it. Clearly, the motive at work would not be the pay, but a person's desire to destroy a great competition that he was unable to beat on the merits. And in Craig's case, it's a competition he was unable to win, and that nobody in his spin-off team, he started this thing called B Team, spinning off from what then became New Wave, what was before Danaher Death Squad. He hasn't been able to win, but that his former team dominates. And I said as a PS, this is important, especially because I'm no great jiu-jitsu competitor myself. Craig Jones is an amazing jiu-jitsu practitioner, a very smart and innovative guy. I'm not a hater of his at all. I liked him for a long time, but I am really disgusted by the pretentiousness of CJI, that it's like this great new thing versus it's actually destroying something really good. And above all, I hate the injustice of his constant attacks on John Danaher and Gordon Ryan, who have done, I think, more than anyone to advance jiu-jitsu, and all he can say is negative stuff. So, Pedro, what's your I was having trouble getting you to do this, and then you suddenly became very motivated. So tell me, tell me your
No,
thoughts.
it's. I believe there is like a few ways to analyze this. I feel like if we take um, what he wants to do and see as a statement to athletes being underpaid across the board on all martial arts events. Um, I think it's a good way to bring a spotlight to a problem that is present for a long time, and I don't even believe that this event itself could fix that. I don't think one jiu-jitsu fighter ever made it $1 million in 1 year of fights, super fights, or even
From
on sponsorships
competition.
from competition or from competition itself. Of course, they have other sources of revenue as
Yes.
far as like DVD sales, jams, seminars. But as far
Yeah.
as competition, I don't think somebody ever made that much money. And if you think about it, of any other sport, the high level athletes are being substantially paid to do their job, and everything else is a complement to their substantial pay. Their sponsorships, their workshops, whatever they are doing, is to increase their revenue. And in jiu-jitsu, it's
Hmm.
completely opposite. You rely on other sources of revenue to be able to
Yes.
sustain into a competition level. So I think that's a good way to bring a spotlight into the lack of pay. I remember 2015 when I did a change on my career, and I did it not because I wanted to stop for competing, but it's because at that point we didn't have no large pays. It was really hard to stay afloat with all all you have to do in order to prepare. And so I had to migrate to be a business owner, and because of their lack of pay. So I think it's a statement. Even for UFC fighters, they're still getting underpaid across the
Well,
board.
okay. Let's. So, I mean, certainly from the perspective of the athletes, as a big fan of jujitsu and somebody who pays myself to see jujitsu, I can empathize with, yeah, people aren't being paid as much as they would like to be paid. But the issue is, I mean, if you look at other sports, so if you look at things like wrestling and judo, leaving aside like Olympians who are paid by governments and stuff like that, those people have a harder time making money than a typical like good jujitsu black belt. I mean, the basic issue is just the market hasn't been there for it, and this is where I think the innovative business model thing is. And your career is actually a perfect 2015 is actually a perfect milestone to make this point that I've been making about innovative business models, because it's really in 2015 when the Danaher Death Squad came on the scene. I think you and Gordon were brown belts at the same time. They came on the scene. One of the things they innovated, which is partially business innovation, was just making the fights much more entertaining by being very submission oriented, very non stalling oriented. So they created a following for what they were doing. That started to make tournaments at least be willing to get some people to pay. And then they subsequently, one of the huge innovations was then BJJ Fanatics deciding, hey, we're going to get this guy, John Danaher, to do instructionals. And then him, and then eventually Gordon Ryan. But that just blew that up, created this huge income source for people. And then there's also FloGrappling, which really found a way to, with multiple sports, including jiu-jitsu, to really monetize it. So my view is the tricky, hard thing when you're doing something like this is how do you actually create a market? I mean, like I've been a writer who was poor for most of my career. Like it sucks to work really hard and think you're really good and not enough people want to pay for it. But the key thing is to find, is to create an innovative, some kind of innovation, usually in business model that actually does this. And so I'm totally for people finding new models to increase pay, and if somebody wants to just subsidize it for a charity, that's okay. But I think the real innovation is in the business model. And what I dislike is Craig literally going after everyone who has created a profitable business model and then coming
Yeah,
up with
and
this fake business model. And notice that I was hearing him on Lex Friedman, he calls his people like this guy an investor. This is not an investor. This is just bankrolling a charitable endeavor.
let me make a point here before you get away. I started as saying is that if there is something good that came from the CGI, is the athlete's pay. I
Mhm.
don't believe itself that anything. I don't even believe. I have a strong believes that I don't even know if this is going to happen ever again. I think it might be one of those one at a time
Yeah, well, that's
thing.
part of being a random charitable
And
thing. And in
and
particular, it's
and
about one person.
since you mentioned in business, I feel like this is almost like a technology company that haven't created something, but because somebody else created, a product, they go out there and they value their company into a minimum investment, all outstanding. They raise all this money from all these people based on something else that somebody did, and then the company doesn't even get off the ground.
But
I think that's
but this is but
CGI
it's kind
itself.
of like that, but it's worse in the sense of at least a company like a company that's trying to copy someone else's business model, at least or modify it, at least they're claiming to have a business that's going to make a profit. Notice what's being celebrated here. He celebrates, oh, it's a nonprofit, but that doesn't that's not an innovation to just give away random money. That's not the innovation. The innovation would be like Craig says he has all these great ideas about, and I hope he's right, by the way. So what I hope is not only do the athletes get paid, I mean, that'll be great. They all get their money. Like I'm happy to see that. I totally get why the athletes want to do it. I don't resent any of them for that. So that's great. And I hope that maybe the rules don't seem that great to me, but I hope the rules are great. I hope that little pit is great. Like I hope there's some innovation that comes from this, but the general idea is he's like, look, it's I'm giving away so much money and it's a nonprofit. No, it would be impressive, and I would believe much more in your days if it was a for profit. If you said, hey, I got this, and we're gonna get $4 million in revenue versus we're gonna get no money in revenue on streaming because we're just gonna give it away. Like that's not an innovation to give it away. It doesn't seem like they're selling that many tickets, although I don't I'm not really against them selling tickets, but it doesn't seem like they're selling that many tickets. It's just giving away a bunch of money. And then one other thing to just show how anti-market this is what is he celebrating the most? One of the things he's celebrating the most is, oh, I got ADCC to increase women's pay and make it equal with men's. Well, that doesn't make any sense financially because people want to see men compete far more than they want to see women in jiu-jitsu, as in many sports. So I think that I don't know why ADCC did that. That doesn't make any sense. So I just think I wouldn't have gotten so mad about this if it weren't for the attacking the people who are actually doing the real hard thing of creating the business model.
I was actually talking to somebody about this, and I'll throw some information here that you probably not know, and I don't
Uh-oh.
even know if I should be
Are we
saying.
going to get in trouble?
No, I'm not going to mention names, so we're good.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I heard from a strong source that uh, the person that is putting this money is also from Abu Dhabi, and it's
Not a
one of the
surprise.
main reasons that they are putting this is because they have some type of rivalry or beef with whoever is the family behind the money
Hmm.
of the ACC. So it's just to basically it's like a millionaires or billionaires fight, like let's see
Yeah.
who can pulls more money. I don't believe that this could even happen if you. I don't even think Craig Jones presented a business plan. He just found
No, it's not
somebody
a business
that
plan.
that
Yeah.
didn't like somebody and literally just said, "Hey, I don't like this person, so here's some money for you to do something to kind of go against that person." But the thing is, you're not going against just that person. You're going against an event that is being created years and years ago. And if you really want to make a point, do this event in another date and do a
Right.
comparison. Look, I was able to do an event. I was able to generate this many views and all of this, but they don't have those facts. Even today, I was looking and they're saying like how many millions of views they had, and they are combining all the appearances on podcasts, and some of those podcasts, the podcast it's they are a famous person itself. You can put anybody in there, and the
Right,
podcast
right,
is
right.
gonna have
Yeah.
200,000 views.
So this is. I want to just talk about the destroying the competition. I want to talk about this first and foremost as a fan. So I'll give you my own experience. ADCC is one of the highlights every 2 years. I've sort of in 2019, I was able to go live for one day. I was working on a book, and I could only afford one day, but it was a thrill to go. In 2022, I could only go for one day. I had agreed to go to a wedding And I had gotten the dates wrong, so I couldn't go to the Sunday. I went to the and it's just something I look forward to. And this was the year I was finally going to go, even though we have an 8-week-old son, and I'm like, I'm still going to go. And then what happens is you create what they did in particular was they just blew up the 77 kilogram division, which was the most exciting division. I mean, in terms of you have Mika Galvao, Cade Rotolo. I guess Ty Rotolo would probably fight at 88, like 77, 88. There were all these exciting things happening. And then at heavyweight, you had Nicholas Marigali. I mean, he's not heavyweight, but an absolute Nicholas Marigali and some other people. You have Victor Hugo, you have Nicky Rod. Like, it was super exciting to see everyone. And what's happened is these divisions have just been totally diluted. You don't have any kind of unequivocal world champion. It makes it much less entertaining. Because in my view, the best people in jiu-jitsu are so much more entertaining than the kind of second and third best people. So it really just
And
blew
to
this
be
up
honest, do you
for
really
the
want to
fans
see?
and for the competitors. Like, they can't get an unequivocal, like Mika Galvao obviously really wants to win 77. Now he can't get sort of an unvarnished victory. So it's really destroying a lot. And when you look, it's within your rights to do this. If you have a lot of money, you can do this. But I think it's irresponsible to use your money to destroy legitimate business phenomena and achievements, in the same way that it would be irresponsible if somebody just paid, you know, the sprinters, like 4 of the top 8 sprinters, $10 million to leave the Olympics. Like, what are you doing? You're just using your money, which hopefully you got productively, although we don't know in the case of the people financing this. But you're using it to destroy other people's achievements and other people's experiences.
And you create also, like for example, the CGI, you create two brackets. They are not necessarily under 80 and over 80. It's like two absolute divisions, a lightweight and a heavyweight. Because honestly, I don't want to see a fight between Nick Ryan and Lucas Barbosa, the Hook. This is a guy that competed at 99 kilos, and then Nicky, it's like, like a tiny kid. Like, this is not an entertaining
Well,
fight. This
I
is
don't, yeah, I mean,
this
I
is
think, but I mean, it's interesting because jujitsu. I was going to make one point is that they're good. By the way, Pedro, sorry to do this, but when I'm talking, can you mute yourself? Not to silence you, but there's an echo. Um,
one
so
second.
let me just see if there's anything. Yeah, no, there's no echo. So I'll try to give more space for you to speak. I'm just looking to see if I have any notes on the competition, because I do want to get into uh the pick. So do you have any more? I'm just looking. Oh, I think one more point about kind of, I called it a vanity vehicle, which isn't a very nice thing to say, maybe. But the key is it's a charitable vehicle. So charitable vehicles can be good for growing things. I mean, you have, like, in the Renaissance, you have people financing artists and stuff like this. And even ADCC was a quasi charitable vehicle for a long time. And that, I think, moved things forward. Although the real achievement was to figure out how to make it profitable. That's what really moved it forward. So, but one thing that's notable about this, and I think it shows the motive, is if you look at Craig's interviews, which I've suffered through some portions of, it's very much about him. Like, I was listening to Lex Friedman. There's no discussion of the athletes, like the amazing athletes that are competing. It's just about him and how amazing is it that he did this, and it and the ticket, it doesn't seem like they're even that interested in people going to the event. Like, the ticket sales seem weak. It just seems like, and it's, I find it annoying that, and look, I know a lot of these hosts are like, I mean, Chris Williamson is a buddy of ours and stuff like that. So no grudge against any given host, but it's crazy to me that Craig is doing this media tour and there's no ADCC mention. Like, on Rogan, it's Craig. On Lex, it's Craig. On Chris's show, it's Craig. And it's like, this isn't the actual exciting competition. And ADCC, I mean, ADCC seems to be doing great, but I would like to see the real competition being promoted. So it's really like, yes, you can get a lot of money and skew markets, but I don't find that as impressive as real value creation.
I I totally agree with you, Alex. And one of the things that I particularly um, don't like with this whole thing is, I believe when what Danaher and Gordon created was a novelty into jiu-jitsu. It was a new way to entertain, to talk, and to teach that really appeal to the American public. The way they speak, the way they break down the techniques, the way it's very like, university, very like dynamic in a way.
Mhm.
So they created a really good novelty. So I can appreciate that because that's still elevating jiu-jitsu. what as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, as a jiu-jitsu competitor and a jiu-jitsu business owner, what I don't appreciate is you adding too much of the funny entertainment ways to make the fight more of a circus show than it's about the fight. I would rather for him to be going around and doing a 15-20 minutes highlight of every one of those amazing competitors and talk about this than be on the news of Brazilian combat sports. Instagram today was the video of him kissing
Right.
Gabby, and the comments like literally cancel this guy because they don't understand, right? Became so much of a funny thing that they don't understand, even if that's actually stage, or if he actually forced himself into kissing her. And then now you take away from being able to talk about fight, and you have a post on Instagram when everybody's talking about a possible, you know, wrongdoing of Craig with the way he approached Gabby, when we should be talking about jiu-jitsu. We shouldn't be talking about like this and that in order to give attention to jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu needs to be a tool within itself to draw people in. You don't need to become a WWE in order to make jiu-jitsu entertaining. And they are trying to
Yeah,
make
and I think
this
that,
about being funny, and I don't think it's the right way.
yeah, and I'd agree. I add that it's, the entertainment should be built on the achievement, right? And that's kind of, if you look at Gordon, it's okay, yeah, shit talking, but his shit talking from the beginning, I like this a lot, was he was saying, hey, I think I'm technically better than all of you. He's like, I'll fight three people from Marcelo Garcia school. I'll fight all of you. Like, but it's actually like a technical claim, and he's making it entertaining to do technical achievement. If you look at the whole kind of B team thing, it's, we finish second, we don't actually win. And there's this idea that, oh my gosh, like Craig is an amazing troll and he's so funny. I mean, he's a moderately funny guy. This guy is not making a living as a comedian, but that doesn't really, it's just sort of, I think what it mostly functions as is for envious people to take down the achievers. And that's what you see with the attack. And everyone can see I'm wearing my, I'm a fanboy. I'm wearing my Gordon Ryan shirt that my wife got for me a while back. Like, I don't know. I mean, I've met Gordon Ryan a few times, just in seminars and stuff like that. Like, I don't know him. I don't know about all the personal stuff. But this is a guy who's just unbelievable at his sport, who suffers through a huge amount of physical difficulties to compete. He clearly, he's amazing with his fans. He's incredibly supportive of his teammates. He was incredibly supportive of Craig when they were teammates. He never said anything negative about Craig before Craig attacked him. And if you look even at right now, what's happening with him and Marigali, like, it's really admirable. They brought in this teammate who's by far the most legitimate potential competitor to Gordon. Gordon, like in John, taught Marigali everything they could. Gordon roots for him. That's a very hard thing to do if you're crippled and you can't be at all your best and you're seeing somebody take the spot that could have been yours. And he's just incredibly encouraging about it. And if you look even at Marigali, people find him cringeworthy. I find Craig much more cringeworthy. But Marigali is also saying, hey, I'm technically better. I'm going to go out and prove it. I love it. So it's just this thing about achievement. I really hate it when achievement is attacked, and there's this idea of, oh, you can't take a joke and stuff. Maybe people will be offended by this, but there's America is particularly good historically at valuing achievement, and Americans don't always know that many European cultures and other cultures don't value achievement as much. And Australia is an example of this. Australia has this expression of cutting down the tall poppies, which means like cutting down the most successful people, bringing them down to size. And that's a lot of I love Australia. It's an amazing place. I love a lot of Australians I know, but that kind of envy and hatred of achievement, like, I really hate to see that. So that's what kind of got me all fired up here. All right, Pedro, final comments on this cultural thing, and then we'll jump into picks.
Yeah, I believe that it's a global thing. We, as outside the United States, are not used to be able to be so confident, and we have this false pretense that if we humble ourselves people gonna look up us and think that we're actually better than we are in some way when basically you're just stating the fact. You know, when you go do a presentation that you don't be like, I think this is correct. No, you state a fact. You know, if you think you're better, you better. Like that's it. And you don't have and you do your work to prove it. But it's definitely a culture thing where Americans can do this very easily, but it is a culture shock for people to be able to say, "Hey, I'm good. Like I can do that." So I understand how people are shocked, but I actually, if there's many other things that irritate me about some of these comments, but it's definitely not how sure of themselves they are. I think I don't have no problem with Gordon or Mary guys being so sure about themselves, but I think a lot of people do, and it's just a time for people to understand and maybe adapt to a culture that is not theirs. So I think it's something that maybe with time we'll be able to see it changing because some Brazilian guys are actually changing their perspective and be able to speak about their achievements a little bit more without getting so negatively impacted by people saying that they are not humble or this and that.
Well, look at the great, just as a final comment, look at the Gracies. I mean, I got into jujitsu. I started it in 2003, but I got into it in 2000 when I read this article about Health Gracie, and you learn about the history. And the Gracies are basically, they're basically putting ads in the newspaper saying, hey, if you want to get your ass beat, call this number. Like they're willing to challenge everyone. There was the Gracie challenge. They'll go in, they'll storm dojos, they'll invite anyone in. There's this confidence and it's this intellectual confidence. And so you look at, I mean, Hickson wanting to challenge Mike Tyson during his career, being willing to fight anyone. So the UFC being willing to show off jiu-jitsu. So the Brazilian jiu-jitsu or Gracie jiu-jitsu has this confidence and this focus on achievement. And I like that. So let's focus on let's oh, and mute yourself for a second, Pedro. So I'm going to talk about just a little about predictions, and then we'll go through all the brackets and stuff like that, both ADCC and CJI. So just a couple notes about to make it a little bit more about philosophy. So I think I have a couple of ideas that I think are important about jujitsu that shape how I predict things. I'm curious what you think about these, but I'll just go through them quickly. So one is that jujitsu outcomes compared to other sports are disproportionately driven by level of knowledge. Like knowledge is much more of an issue in jujitsu than it is in other sports. Like in jiu-jitsu, you were talking about different weight divisions, but in jiu-jitsu, it's relatively commonplace that a 175-pound world level guy can beat a 200 plus or even 225-pound world level guy. And it's just, that's impossible in boxing or even wrestling. And you even see in jiu-jitsu people who are naturally unathletic, like Gordon Ryan is not like a supernatural athlete at all. He's like a slow guy and he can be dominant. So there's something like jiu-jitsu is so based on knowledge manifested in technique, and I think that that's important. And because of that, one thing is jujitsu has, because it's so knowledge driven and knowledge is so variable among people and it's so open to discovery, there are unusually large disparities in technical ability in jiu-jitsu. So like the best people are way better than other people. And this goes into my predictions where like there's so many of the people I think have basically no chance. And then there are a few people who do have a chance. Then another thing that's interesting is with jiu-jitsu, one aspect is people don't compete that frequently compared to other. I think this is one consequence of this. Pedro, can you mute yourself? I'm still getting echoes. Um, there are very large disparities in what I'll call winning skill. So the actually knowing how to apply your technical ability in the moment in terms of things like your tactics, your fortitude. You'll see, I mean, an example is Gordon Ryan's brother, Nicky. It seems like a great guy, but Gordon, I remember saying early on, said Nicky needs to compete more, but Nicky, because he just wants to sort of perfect himself in the gym and then compete. But then you have a world level athlete who's barely competed and then has a lot of trouble actually competing. Hopefully that changes. I definitely like the guy and root for him. I think one other thing is that the training programs are very unequal. So I tend to look for the schools with the most knowledge and the best, who are really obsessed with coaching. And so kind of all of that boils down to I'm factoring this thing in and I'm looking at basically two things. What's their technical ability, realizing that some people are way better than others, and then what's their winning ability? How good are they applying that? So I find that when I look from that perspective, it helps clarify things. But any thoughts on how you on that framework, Pedro, or on how you evaluate these things?
Yes, yes. I actually disagree a little bit on your first comment.
About the
I believe,
knowledge.
yes, I actually think it's the reason why jiu-jitsu has so much discrepancy is because jiu-jitsu is still very unprofessional. Um,
Mm,
and I don't think it's a level of knowledge, it's a level of how professional these people are, in a way of how well they are being coached, prepared, and how professional they are taking their level of training. Um, I'm currently teaching privates to a top NBA player, and it's it's completely different. Like, people are not getting prepared like this.
yeah.
People don't invest their time in, and if in those that are doing this, most of them are on the top. So I think it's a lack of taking jiu-jitsu more professional, having somebody that can guide you on every aspect of the training, from nutrition to psychology to preparation, from medicine, everything, for recovery professionally, not one person doing it all.
Right.
Because when you can split these and can be, uh, then your knowledge will be a little bit emphasized in a way that you'll do better. I don't believe, I disagree a little bit with you, because I've seen people, they are not at their top knowledge, or they are not the best, but they had some more professionalism
Hmm.
into their training, and they exceed more than people that had, straight up just talent.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that I definitely didn't state. I think it's related because one thing I noticed with the professionalism is people don't seem to try to learn everything they can from the most successful people. So you see, like Gordon in particular, like really puts out so much of what he does, and there's all this competition footage, and it just seems like a lot of people just don't watch it. I think the younger people do, which I think is part of why the younger generation, this is one reason among several why younger people tend to perform better in these things than you might expect, because some of the younger people will just look at what the best people are doing. Like you even see some of the art of jiu-jitsu guys, which that's one of the really impressive schools. You see like guys like Cole Abate and Tynan Doppler, like they explicitly talk about, hey, we study Gordon, whereas many of Gordon's contemporaries would never say, hey, we study him. But you think about a professional field, you just obsessively study everything you can possibly do. One thing I talked about with Ben Askren once when he was on my regular podcast, just, people have this idea of a game, like I have my own specific game and I'm just going to sort of be limited to this versus figuring out everything that works. Of course, you can have a game that's what works best for you. But so I do totally agree with this professionalism thing. And I'll think more about how that fits in. But so awesome point. Let's jump into super fights and okay, so we got to go through these pretty quickly, but I'll sort of we'll alternate. But let's start out with both of these people, particularly one of them, Gordon Ryan, and then our fellow Gracie Baja uh, athlete Felipe Pena.
I'd love to comment on that one. I think that if there's a man out there that can beat Gordon, it's Philippe. But uh, I'm kind of I saw Philippe's match against Nicky Rod, the one that he's supposed to fight Gordon, and he looked very improved on some aspects that I was waiting for him to improve. But then on his last fight against Lovato, I kind of felt like something was missing, and so I'm like still like I feel like there's like a small chance, but it's gonna come up to his level of conditioning. This super fight's gonna play the day before. Is Felipe is gonna do his bracket, then he's gonna have a super fight on the end of
He
the day.
has
I
two
don't know this schedule.
fight. He has two fights on Saturday, so it's a Saturday fight. So he has his first two rounds of ADCC competition. Sort of like last year, Gordon had the semifinal and final before fighting Galvao, and then strategically he just basically leadlocked two people really quickly and was fresh.
So I think that it's gonna play. His chances start to decline for how long his matches are on Saturday. The longer
Yeah.
his matches are on Saturday, the last chance he has to win. And that's, for me, is a fact, because Philippe is an older athlete than Gordon, and the age itself will play. And I think Gordon has, more a better skill overall than Felipe, and that is only one space that Felipe can beat Gordon is that mistake when Gordon turned a little bit out and Felipe can be able to invert into the back take.
Yeah.
And that's more, Felipe needs to be fresh in a way of being able to stay solid in that position. And Gordon only has been studying this recently to avoid that, because that's the way that he got beat twice by
Yeah.
Felipe. So I think the longer the matches take on Saturday, the less chance Felipe has to win. I would love to have him. He's a guy we lived together for 6 months. He's a great guy, a great competitor, represents the same team as me. But I think Gordon is just in a different level. I would be more wanting to see a fight between him and Meregali. I think that would be a better
Yeah.
fight than him and Gordon.
That's what everyone wants to see. So, um, and remember the mute. So, yeah, I mean, and let me just preface. So, yeah, Felipe Pen is like an amazing competitor. Fun fact: when we were purple belts, I think he was like 15 or something. I think I saw this guy coming up against me in competition. I'm like, I could just tell like this guy's a killer. It was like 45 seconds. I think omoplotted armbar. It was just this guy was not that it took that to beat me, but I mean, this guy is just an amazing jiu-jitsu athlete. I always want to qualify because I'm not an amazing jiu-jitsu athlete, so I don't want to act superior just because I'm commenting on people. I do think the whole issue really comes to Gordon's fitness because he's like clearly incredibly sick and is on and off in terms of his health. He seems to be able to pull it together, but I just think technically he's on a totally different level than anyone else. I mean, if you look at Felipe has competitive advantages with teammates of Gordon. He lost to Marigali. You see when Gordon is just even remotely in shape, like his Gaudio fight. I mean, at this point, people underrate that, but he's just Gaudio prepared really hard. Gaudio is really good. He's not as good as Felipe, but he's really good. Like Gordon just doesn't lose. He doesn't lose anything. Like he doesn't lose a point. He doesn't like nothing happens that he doesn't really want to happen. Even though that match we saw in person where they were fighting no time limit, he's like when we were watching that, I was a little bit scared. But then you look at it and see like he was never in danger. He's tiring him out, and I just think on the feet, Gordon with ADCC rules, even though he might not look the best, he's just nobody is as good as he is on the feet, and so that means he's going to get on. He can get on top if he wants to, and he has any energy. And then I think he's just Felipe is not going to be able to stop him. I mean, Felipe couldn't stop Marigali. I don't think he's going to stop Gordon. And then I'd say the same for Yuri Samoa, as I don't think that's even as interesting because they've fought 4 times. I just think it's really so it really just depends on Gordon's health, and it's really sad to see how much that's affecting things. And I suspect that he'll at least retire indefinitely if he wins both of these because it seems like he's struggling so much. Any final thoughts on that? I don't think the Yuri one is that dramatic question.
I think like one of the biggest things that Felipe has on Gordon, it's a mental aspect. Like he still has a bug in Gordon's head somehow because he's the guy that has beat Gordon in a
Yeah,
dominant
but
way
Gordon beat
before.
him pretty easily last time.
But what the only part that I was a little bit like this with Gordon was his last fight. He was very frustrated on the initial fight, and his interview
Yeah.
was a very frustrated interview. So uh, if that Gordon shows up with frustration, and we add the mental aspect that Philippe can play on Gordon's head somehow, then Philippe's chances increase. But I still think that a minimal chance. I think Gordon is winning both of his super fights. I think Yuri, he's probably gonna be a 5 to 7 minutes fight at the most, and Felipe, I think Gordon's gonna just play with him a little bit and probably submit around like minute 8 or 9. That's what I think.
All right, let's talk about it. We got to go pretty quickly. ADCC absolute. So, I mean, for me, I would pick Marigali. Also interesting, though, most interesting is seeing Mika Galvao, who's just one of the most talented and exciting jiu-jitsu athletes ever. Griffith, I think, is a competitor. Giancarlo is a competitor. Isaac Michelle, I think, is also plausible. I mean, at 88, I think he has a plausible chance of winning. But anyone else you think is interesting for the absolute, and who do you expect to win the absolute?
No, I think that's probably we have a high chance depending how Mika's cardio is fighting against some bigger guys and taking some longer wrestling matches. He has a big chance to get into the finals against Meregali, and I know Meregali has a bigger chance to win, but I would love to see Mika winning. Um, I think we'll just give you a new perspective and more feel to like we have a continuation of fights. I think if Meregali just goes in there and dominates, and then Gordon dominates, it's like okay, what is next? Like who is next? How long is it going to take to have somebody come up again? So I
Right.
like
I mean,
to
it's
see.
part of why it's tragic, why we wish we had no CGI, right? CJI, right? Because we could have, I mean, Marigal would have to go through Victor Hugo, Nicky Rod. I mean, these would at least be really interesting fights. And this goes to the 99 plus kilogram. Like looking at this division by my criteria, like the only people I can really see are Felipe, Luke Griffith, maybe Big Dan from New Wave, and maybe even Josh Saunders, that huge Australian guy, just because he's so big and he seems pretty technical. But I mean, I just don't see any of these other guys really winning, and it shows how the divisions at both the CJI and the heavyweight of ADCC are kind of thin. But do you have any thoughts on this division?
Yeah, like no, I wish the CGI wasn't happening because that would really increase the ADCC, but unfortunately it is happening. So I I think you know I agree with what you said, but I still believe that Meregali has a way to dominate his way through.
Yeah, yeah, we haven't gotten to his weight division because he's not heavyweight. So
I think
that's so for
on the plus
heavyweight.
99.
Yeah, yeah,
This this is like a kind of like interesting division because I would say that it's the division with the less amount of like uh, fighters that's been in the scenario for a long time or like very
mhm.
dominant. So you and because it's a very heavy, it's a heavy division. Quarter is going to play a big role. So I think it really depends how the brackets go. I on this one I don't have a prediction yet, just because of it's going to depend on how those guys feel at that moment. Those big guys, if they don't go to a one overtime, you can completely kill one side of the bracket
Yeah,
compared to the other.
yeah, agreed. Let's talk about CJI over 80 kilograms. So here, I think there's more people who can compete. I don't know if you have the brackets in front of you, but my prediction is actually I'm torn between Nicky Rod and Victor Hugo. I'm slightly picking Nicky Rod in this format. It seems like it would be better. It's 3 5-minute rounds. Seems like if he uses wrestling strategically, it would help. The other ones I can see plausibly are Kyle Bame and Joao Rocha. But those and maybe I guess there's a guy from Penn State, I guess Greg Kirkvliet. Maybe he's a sleeper just because he's an amazing wrestler.
I think it's Vitor Hugo and Nick Rod. I don't think there is any other way that this is going, and I think Vitor Hugo is probably going to take it.
You think so?
Yes,
How come?
I think that he has really strong close guard, and he he I just think like Nick Rod is it's a good competitor, but he doesn't have as many skills that Vitor would have. In case I don't think his arsenal is as big as Vitor. Vitor could pull something unexpected where I think Nick is a little bit more predictable. So on those short breaks really help the Brazilians because Americans traditionally have a better cardio
Oh,
uh,
interesting.
because Americans get introduced to physical preparation in a way younger than Brazilians. So I think those breaks between rounds actually help Vitor Hugo a lot. And when Nick has of course, on his side, he has his physical and endurance aspect. So those breaks can really bring Vitor Hugo back in and
Mhm.
make him being fresh for the next round. So I think that's one of the big reasons why I decided to go with him compared to Nick Rod.
Interesting. All right, so if we go to 99 kilogram minus, I mean, the two obvious favorites are Marigali and Kynan. I definitely have Marigali winning, but Kynan is interesting. I mean, he's always phenomenal. I mean, he's been phenomenal in the last few ADCCs, leaving aside his absolute where Lachlan Giles leg locked him. I don't know this guy. The only one I'm not familiar with that I think might, this guy Declan Moody, I've heard is really good. I haven't studied him at all. And then there's Cyborg is in the division, which is interesting because he's just good at winning historically. But yeah, I can't see anyone else. But yeah, what do you think among those four or anyone else?
No, I think it's definitely the first two you mentioned. I think Kainan and it's an outstanding athlete, Gi and no Gi, and he's always gonna be there as long as his mind is on the right place. But I think Meregari plays a bug on his head, so it's gonna be hard for him to beat Meregari because of that. I think technically he has the skill. I just don't know if mentally he could handle the whole pressure that it is for somebody to beat Meregali and Gordon. We always talk about the pressure of you staying at the top, but we also don't need to realize there's also pressure to dethrone somebody. Like, am I gonna be that guy that beat and took that? Like that's a pressure within self as well.
Yeah, I mean, particularly because both Gordon and Nicholas are really good at like claiming their own superiority, claiming the other person is inferior, claiming they're going to embarrass them. Like that, that's I think a lot of it because I think there is sort of an advantage to not being at the top, but people have a lot of fear of embarrassment and that kind of thing. And so if you say to somebody, "Hey, you're going to look terrible," like unless you're really confident and you think it's baseless, which is hard to believe if Gordon or Nicholas are saying it, it's a little bit. I can see how it really gets to people.
Definitely, definitely.
Okay, let's do 80, and remember to mute yourself. ADCC 88 kilogram. So this is one of the ones that I find hardest to predict because at the top you have Giancarlo Bedoni, who's I think probably the most technically skillful person there. Won last time. I picked Tyrotolo, who just lost in the first. Oh, you're still not muted, Pedro. Who lost in the first round, but then did really well in the absolute. I think there's Giancarlo, so he's really interesting because he's really good, and so, but and he was all there at ADCC. But if you look at the interim, he lost to Pedro Mourinho. He's lost a bunch of times. He's definitely not this super like his winning skill is not the same as his technical skill. Now he still seems really motivated. I would, if I had to guess one person, I would guess him. But Isaac Michel is kind of interesting. He's a good wrestler, good at jiu-jitsu, familiar with a lot of the same stuff, training with the Penn State people. There's also Pedro Mourinho, who's a very good, I would say technically not as good as some of these other guys, uh, but still like really good and really good winner. And then kind of a sleeper who's interesting, who I'd feel a lot better about if it hadn't been for his most recent match, is Jacob Couch, who sometimes looks awesome, although against what's his name, Jonathan Gracie, just got mauled. And we're going to talk about Jonathan Gracie, who's a really interesting pick. But any thoughts? What are your thoughts on 88? We lost you, Pedro. Let me see if I can add him again. There you go.
I got
Brought you
disconnected.
back from the dead.
So I really think Giancarlo has a technical advantage. I believe that he's been a decline since his last ACC win, especially with the loss to Pedro. And but I believe Pedro is he's a winner. Like he's a grinder. He's gonna find a way to grind his way through it. Isaac Michel, has impressed me on some of his wins, but it, this is one of the divisions that got ruined, unfortunately.
Even even though the winners have, because it's weird because even though the winners, I think the top three people are there, but that doesn't quite capture it because you don't have Tyra Tolo, who I think would be the favorite. And that, that would be really exciting. I mean, even Isaac did pretty well against Ty in their one championship fight until Ty just, you know, reversed it and stuff. I mean, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think 3 to 4 divisions have gotten there. I just don't see any of these other guys. Okay, let's talk about one of the best ones, which is CJI under 80 kilograms. I mean, this is really the thing that wrecked the most ADCC. So we've got Ty Rotolo versus Jason Nolf, Kate Rotolo versus Mateus Denis. So my top four, I have 5 that I think could plausibly win it. Ty Rotolo, Kate Rotolo, Joseph Chen, Nicky Ryan, and Lucas Barbosa, who's another example of a guy who's, he's a big guy. He's a really good winner. He grinds out a lot. He knows the Ruotolo brothers pretty well. So my number one is Ty. My number two is Cade, just because I think Ty's a little bit more tactical. Joseph Chen is, I find, really impressive, really smart. Nicky Ryan, I think it could happen, but he doesn't have that demonstrated winning skill, and he tends to gas out. So yeah, what do you think of those or anyone else?
I'm actually like, yeah, which side of the bracket does Skate is? Who is on the same side of Lucas?
I'm not sure. Let me, because I reorganized mine, uh,
Because
so I'm not
I
sure.
I think that we have possibly an Atos final in there, and
Well, yeah,
I want to
it's an
see
Nachos final
how.
if it's Cade versus Ty.
But Lucas too, right?
Yeah, so I pulled up the brackets. Yeah, so Lucas is on the he's the same as Ty. So he would fight Ty in the semifinals.
So we have a chance of being Lucas against Kate on the finals.
Yeah.
You need to see also, Alex, how it plays to fight your teammates, especially the teammates that came after you and somehow had some level of respect. So uh, Lucas is being with them for, I believe, since 2017, I believe,
Hmm.
with Atos, maybe
I thought it
16.
was longer than that, but I don't know.
Like living in San Diego. I remember
Uh-huh.
him. He won double gold on 2006, 2015 black belt nogi, um, and I think that's when he was with them. So, but he was already like a top guy, and the Rotolos were still young, so they have some level of respect that on the mats that, and Lucas has the maturity of seeing them training and seeing them growing. And
Hmm.
as you get older in jiu-jitsu, you learn how to strategically beat the younger guys because you're not as
Yeah.
on their prime. So I'm pretty sure he has some strategies to beat them more technically because they have trained so much together. So that is a chance that Lucas could take it all, and
Yeah.
based on that. But I still think the Rutolos have a chance also to do a match, a final match, and
Yeah. I
go
think
crazy.
I'm my favorite is Gordon Ryan, and he sort of feuds with them. So I'll take his side on that. But in general, like they're really impressive. They're really. I don't think they get credit enough. I mean, they get called athletic. Like they're super smart. They're super technical, very tactical. Like as small as they are to be able to take on these big guys. I mean, it's hard to imagine beating two of those. Although remember that Tyrotolo pick of mine got destroyed when Josh Hinger beat him in the first round of ADCC. So that could have been an example of the elder person. All right, we just got a few more minutes. Let's talk about. So, well, who's your pick to win CJI? If you have
Let's
to commit.
let's be controversial. I'll pick Lucas Barbosa.
Okay, yeah, and we'll put all these in. Okay, ADCC 77. So this is one of the most interesting ones for me. So I have five people that I think could plausibly win. Mika, Jonatas Gracie, who's looked, I mean, he just beats everyone that they put in front of him, and he's at this weight, cutting to this weight. Gary Tonin is really interesting. I picked him last time when he was at 66. He lost the first round. It seemed like was having a lot of difficulty with the weight cut. But if you look at him like versus JT, he's a fascinating guy because really high technical ability, very intermittent in terms of the winning ability. Like you look at the JT Torres fight in 2019, it looked like he could have easily beaten JT, but he sort of turned on the gas late. Then you've got JT, who I think is always plausible, although hasn't looked that great. And then also possibly Elijah Dorsey from Lloyd Irvin School, which is Lloyd Irvin's another guy I like. I used to have the good fortune of training at his school a long time ago. He's looked good, although he had a lot of trouble against Joseph Chen. But I think all of those guys could plausibly do it. I still put Mika. I mean, Mika is like technically amazing. He's a winner. He's getting better and better at wrestling. His girlfriend is the freaking, I mean, it's women's wrestling, but still the dominant women's wrestler in the world. I mean, he got submitted once by Cade Rotolo, so it's possible he could get submitted, particularly on the legs. But I mean, this guy is just the only thing I question Mika about, which I don't think will cause him to lose, is he doesn't seem to finish a lot. Like he doesn't finish submissions as early in matches as I would expect, and sometimes I think he's actually just giving them up so he doesn't end the match in 30 seconds. But I don't think that'll happen at ADCC. But yeah, this guy, it's really hard. I think these other guys could potentially do it. Maybe Gary most likely, but Mika is really, I mean, he is a phenomenon.
Yeah, I think like we might have a finals of Mika and Jonathan's because Jonathan's is just being a streak. He's being very dominant. His wrestling's been really good. His pass system is being really good. He can frustrate a lot with his in and out approaches. And I think if there is somebody that could beat Mika, it's probably Jonathan's because his style that he's performing lately of just coming in and coming out, and every time he's coming out in an angle already looking to advance a little further and bother more the pass. I think that's a style that could make Mika be a little frustrated, but he needs to take Mika down. Uh, but I
Yeah, and
think
even if
that
you take him down, I mean, he's just so dynamic. He's like, I mean, he's sort of Hoffa, but even more of a finisher in that, Hoffa's favorite move is the armbar. And I think people whose favorite move is the armbar, often they're super dynamic and intuitive. Like they can just get into it from all these different positions. And Mika's just crazy in terms of just getting into submissions from anywhere. So hard to root against the guy. I mean, I wish we could see him and Cade again. That would be exciting, which is part of the reason why I'm not. Okay, final one, ADCC 66. Now, we might disagree on this one. I think there are actually seven people I could even see maybe winning. So we have Pato, Diego Hayes, obviously, Gabriel Souza. I think those are kind of the obvious ones people would pick. There's also DeAndre Corby from Standard Jiu-Jitsu. Greg Souders, also another guy I know from kind of the Jiu-Jitsu past. Very smart guy who's done some innovative stuff. Ethan Krellinston has looked quite good lately from B Team. Owen Jones looks pretty good. I haven't studied him a lot, but he seems like he's got a good confidence and good skill. And then actually, my pick is Dorian Olivares, who's now training at New Wave, just because this guy is like he is a winner. He seems more and more technical, and he just seems like a freaking freight train. That is a really good wrestler. That is going to be really hard to deal with. So it feels like you have to submit him, and I don't know that these other guys can submit him, and I don't think they can deal with his wrestling.
yeah, like he's one to watch. I gotta stick with the Brazilians on this one. I really like Diogo and Diego. I think it's a good country singer. So they sound like they are a country singer partners in Brazil. Diego and Diogo. That would be a, a band in Brazil. But I really think that what I am impressed a lot is by Atos, by AOJ system these days of how they're approaching everything in such a modern way, and they're so ahead of everybody. So I think like Diego comes with this extra, uh, professionalism into the division um, that maybe Dorian is with the new wave, but I don't know if he is getting all the attention that he deserves or all the training that he could have it when Diego is being getting all the attention at AOJ and maybe being with a little bit more prepared than everybody else. But you also have Kennedy that he
And
can be very good.
by the way, I forgot to say Fabricio Andre. I think is he should be in the plausible people. Kennedy, yeah, it just doesn't seem like it's his time.
Yeah, I think like the biggest problem for Vinicius Andre, he gets really frustrated. Like he's a really like mental fighter. Like if things don't go his way, he starts to break a lot. Even on the last fight that he had, the commentator they was commentating on FloGrappling. I think it was Sean Williams said, "Hey, he better not get frustrated right now because when he gets frustrated, and as soon as they commentated, he got his guard fast, and then it was the end of the fight." So I see maybe a finals between Diego and Diogo, just because there's something there, there's a spark there. Diogo is still a very young competitor. I think Diego has a little bit more. uh, time on his belt and more like maturity to win. So I'll say probably Diego Pato as the winner of that division.
All right. Well, I got to go to my meeting. Just FYI, so I picked the fanboy that I am. I picked basically New Wave winning everything except for 77, uh, and we'll see uh, how our picks do. But yeah, hopefully. I hope. By the way, if anyone is watching this, I'll be at ADCC on Sunday. So if you want to say hi, just send me a message on Instagram, and I'll try to check it with some kind of frequency. And looking forward to seeing all these guys. And I will be watching CJI, even though I wish it didn't exist. I'm definitely very interested in that under 80, and very interested to see what happens. So thanks, man, for joining me. Got to run, but hope you're having fun in Brazil, and we'll catch up in person soon.
Thank you, man. Always a pleasure joining you, and I hope you have a good time in Vegas.
Thank you. All right. Now I'm
Take
trying
care.
to figure out how to stop this so it records. Okay, so let's see. Will this allow me? Okay, if I click this, I'm hoping this records.